Okay, so the last couple of days we learned the first basic part of the scientific method. As I said earlier, go ahead and grab a piece of scratch paper, a blank piece of paper, anything works. Let me quickly review what the scientific method is. The scientific method is honestly just a way of collecting information or being aware of things. People call it a scientific method because that's the formal name for it. For me, I just saying being aware of things around you. Someone who lives life not being dazed and they hold himself to fully living life have used the scientific method a lot. The goal of the scientific method is to solve problems or to figure out something so we can better understand it. Hopefully, to better understand the type of virus, like as you guys can understand that COVID-19 right now is a big deal. Another thing is to solve a problem. What happened when we run out of oil and gas? So for the last 30 or 40 years, people have been trying to create electric car, right? You guys seen those Tesla car? But a lot of other companies are making electric car too, from BMW to Mercedes to Toyota to Honda. A car that has both gas and electricity. So you guys see, we use the scientific method all the time. Another example is like, for example, fingernail polish. In the old day, when they get wet, after a while, they start having issue. So how can we cure the nail polish and make it harder? We can use gel, we can use UV light, and so on. So the scientific method is used all the time. What is an observation? Honestly, observation is just being aware. It's a way of collecting information using your senses or tool. You want to see how tall someone is, that's an observation using tool. You want to see how fast a banana can ripen if it's in a plastic bag versus if it's just being exposed to air. Those are observation. So anything that you are noticing with your sense or you with your sense using a tool like a ruler or a microscope, that's what an observation is. Okay? So just being aware. Last, I'll not talk about a hypothesis. Two key things I want you to note with hypothesis is it's simply a really good guess. When I say a really good guess, that means it's a guess based on something. It's just not like a random guess. For example, if I guess, like one of you will win an Oscar one day, well, that's a random guess. I don't know that. But if some of you are really good at gymnastics and stuff, I say, hey, you might have a chance of going to state for a competition. Or you're really good at soccer and say, hey, our soccer team, if you're playing on it and there's a few other really good soccer player, we might win the regional, tournament or something like that. That's a hypothesis. So a hypothesis is just a guess, but it has to be testable. That means you got to have a result afterward. And pretty much all hypotheses for high school level will start with if, something that you do, and then the second word you have to have in it is the word then, a consequence. So if something is done, then there's a consequence. If I were to switch out my soccer shoes, then I would have less foot pain. Okay? Or if I were to switch to a different mouse, my gaming might have a higher score because of a better reaction time. Now, you don't have to give it an explanation, and most of the time, scientists don't give an explanation. So, a better hypothesis of the mouse would say if I switch to a faster speed mouse with more DPI, then my gaming score will go up. No explanation needed. Okay? So, that is the main part of our topic today. Now, I'm going to ask you guys to participate. Please look at this picture as detailed as you can and write down for me 2 or 3 facts that someone who is going fishing is going to notice from this picture. I help you guys out with this first one with some arrow. Okay? The blue represent the way the water is flowing. That's called the water current. And then the red is pointing to something. So go ahead and jot down 2 or 3 things in your notes and then go ahead and type it in the chat on the side. What are something that you are noticing? So for those of you who are joining again, here's the link to the slideshow. You can access it yourself. That was slide number 7. So go ahead and take a second and jot down a couple things on the chat that you're noticing in that picture. And I'll come back to the chat in a little bit. Remember, if you don't participate, your brain is not processing it. You're slowing it down. So the more you process something, the better you understand it and the faster your brain will become adjusted to thinking and observation. And once again, what is observation? Is just being aware. So please write down a couple things in the chat. Little fish, the tadpole, very good. Okay. So give people now 15 seconds to write down anything else they notice in that picture. A very famous person in a story, you guys must have heard of Sherlock Holmes, the detective. He is actually based on a real life doctor who has been known to be very good at observing. And Sherlock Holmes, if you notice, he solved crime by his observation skill. Okay. So by being aware of things, you can figure out how to run a business better, how to fish better in this case, and so on. So I'll give you a real life example of them in a little bit. So see little fishes, small fishes. Anything else? So most of you are noticing what is in just the arrow. So let me continue then. Thank you for those of you who participate. That was pretty nice to see that. So I've been fishing for about 10 years or so. I used to be okay at it. Now I guess I'm a lot better, but I'm not a professional by any means. So obviously I would notice the fish. I would notice that they're long and skinny, about a couple inch long. I also noticed the water is pretty clear and the area where I'm fishing is pretty shallow. And it goes from shallow to slightly deeper. So that area was maybe in about 5 or 6 inch of water. And then the darker area outside that you can't see because the water is a little bit clear is about 2 or 3 feet. So that means that there might be some fish hiding out there waiting for when the wind blows or the current change for them to see some bait fish run out and they might hit it. So I'm being aware of that. I'm asking my question is, how do I catch the fish hiding in the deeper water right below the wood example? So my scientific question is, how would I trigger or get the fish to react? Remember, not all fish eat because they're hungry. Sometimes they eat because they are reacting to something. They see an opportunity and they jump on it. So my scientific question is, how can I get those fish to bite? Next, I have a hypothesis based on that scientific question. So it goes observation, question, and then hypothesis last. Okay, we're wrapping up pretty fast today. So what can I do? So one hypothesis is, if I use a bait similar to the bait fish and throw them in the same area from deep and pulling it in, or from in swinging it out, then I can catch a fish. Okay, does that make sense? I need you guys to unmute your microphone and tell me if that makes sense. I see some thumbs up. That works too, from Anthony and Ryan. So if I use a bait similar to the bait fish, then I can catch a fish. The second thing is, I didn't put it in there. Not a hypothesis I can have is, if I use a bait that looks natural because it's pretty clear, right? Then more fish will react. If I use something that was like bright yellow, or hot orange, or hot pink, they might not react very well because the water is still pretty clear. They can tell it's fake. So let's see if Mr. Wu hypothesis is correct. So I'm testing it. So I'm going to grab a bait that looks like a minnow, like a little skinny fish. I put it on a very light jig head so that way it doesn't sink too deep because I know the fish is not out in very, very deep water. Earlier I made observation that I saw some swirl. So I cast it out 5 or 6 times and this is what happened. Just in case you guys think I'm making a fake picture, look at this little bend in the grass right there. Can you guys see the same bend right here? So this is the same area. You guys see my bait? It looks kind of like a skinny little fish, right? You guys see that? And because it was sunny, I picked a bait that had a couple gold flecks in it to imitate fish scale. So I caught a walleye about 3 minutes later. Now, obviously, I didn't just throw it out once and expect to catch a fish. This was about 14 or 15 casts later. And the first few casts, I was moving it pretty slow. Nothing happened. And then the last like 5 or 6 casts, I was moving it faster, imitating a scared little bait fish running away. So my hypothesis was testable, it was reasonable. I said if I use a bait similar to the bait fish and move it in a reaction way, then I can catch a fish. That hypothesis proven to be true. Okay. Now, obviously, after I fished for a few more minutes, I didn't get any more fish on that bait. So I made another observation is maybe all the fish that like that bait is already done biting. But I know there's got to be more fish in that river. So I switched to a bait that has a little bit of noise and a little bit of rattle. So I had a jig head that had a little rattle on the tip, and I cast it out. Now, before I cast it out, my hypothesis is if I use a different bait that's similar but a little different, then I can get a few different fish to react. So let me present this, and then after about 12 casts with the new bait, this is what happened. Okay. And you guys see that little square grass right there? And let's check back over here. You guys can see the little bait fish swimming right in the water still. Okay, so real life example of using scientific observation for a hobby of mine. Could be for gaming and something else or anything else. So our activity right here is I want you guys in your scratch piece of paper to tell me a few information about this rock that you notice. Could be color, shape, make a guess on the size. Is it smooth? Is it rough? Go ahead and spend the next 30 seconds. Go ahead and jot down a few facts on your scratch sheet of paper or in the chat. So go ahead and do that. Okay, I'll put the rock up. And go ahead in the next 30 seconds, please write down a few facts about the rock. You can't get this wrong. Okay, there's no way you can get this wrong, so don't be shy. There's no judgment. A bit brown. So for people who are just joining us, let me send you the link again in the chat. And let me take attendance for today. Okay. So we'll continue with this in a little bit. Later, I'm going to ask you guys to observe the rock number 2. And then also chat it down in your group. So I'm going to stop recording right now.